But I wanted to share this with you all as well because John Merrow is a past speaker here at the Faculty Mentoring Faculty Program. He has been a speaker at the Summer Institute on Teaching and Technology as well. He's the first winner of the Academic Federation Teaching Award. And he's a long-time leader when it comes to teaching and teaching of writing here at UC Davis. In fact, he and Eric Schrader and others co-founded Writing on the Edge, which is a 20-year-old journal about writing and the teaching of writing. And another example of the fine work that the University Writing Program is doing to present writing and teaching to the larger community. And we at the Teaching Resources Center are happy to have them as colleagues and as mercenaries in our ongoing war to improve teaching here at UC Davis. I have to rethink that metaphor. So therefore, I'm going to hand these out with one warning, and that is that when Wendy Silk, who's also been a past presenter here at FMFP, wrote me to ask if it would be appropriate for her to bring her 13-year-old daughter to this event, I wrote back to her immediately and said, no, it would not. And furthermore, I'm worried about some of the freshmen who are going to be coming. In fact, Frank Hertz, who just walked in, was present at the last talk by John Merrow at Poetry Night at Bistro 33. Weren't you, Frank?
Yep.
And would you recommend that children and grandchildren should attend that event?
Yeah, in principle, yes, depends how old they are.
Right. That's a good point. I guess many of us are children and grandchildren. Hi, welcome.
It's just only for faculty or others?
No, please. I don't know you, but you are welcome to this event. So thank you very much for coming. But it's a lot of fun. There's comedy, and it's another example of the sort of engagement that our faculty partake in, though most of us with much less swearing. So, and after we see some of this film, we're actually going to have a conversation about some of the topics that were raised. And so now I'm going to pass around a consent to record, which is just something that says that you don't mind if you'd be videotaped as part of this conversation. If you do mind, then I recommend that you sit way back in that corner and that when we start talking that you crouch. We'll pass those around as well. Right, a hoodie, which is, yeah. Hi, Bob, welcome.
Is this where the free movies are?
Yes, absolutely.
But only if you brought the popcorn.
Oh, well.
Doesn't look good.
Yeah. And we're going to record the conversation, so that's a consent to record. Hi, welcome. Good to see you, Terry.
Are you the UC witness?
I probably will be. Let me witness all of you. Thank you so much.
I think do you have the consent to be filmed? No, we need to pass them down here. Sorry.
Okay.
Got it wrong.
Now I'm going to need to jump around to a specific section of this DVD. Is there something special I should know for?
It's a scale lunch.
I want to jump.
About time we
Still want to, but
Does he have any more of those?
I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm okay.
Is this recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
Send me a little email when
Is there a way-
it's a good time for you.
Minutes here.
Can I just promise not to see? In a gentleman's agreement. It's
How long is the witness?
Total is 2 hours.
He is the witness, okay.
All
All
right.
right.
Record it to post.
yeah, they put you in there.
Yes.
guys.
Yeah, he's doing better. He might compare metaphors. We never know.
That mean they
Okay,
retain the right
and
to
is
do
that,
it.
is that how we consult? Okay, great.
Without
Thank you so
Yes.
much, Wendy.
You can skip.
Great, that's what I'll do.
Retains the right not to.
Oh, absolutely. And
I don't know what that means, but
yes.
it's too late now.
That's fine. So I'm going to get started so that we can do some quick introductions. A reminder that although this conversation will be videotaped, the video will not be videotaped because we didn't get anyone to sign a release for that. But we will engage in a conversation. I'll do this awkward sort of thing, though, when I stop the videotape, and that is I'm going to stand up and make a few summative remarks so that people following at home can know what's going on. And then we'll start talking about some of the issues that were raised. I chose this, this tape, this DVD, Declining by Degrees, from PBS Home Video. It's about 4.5 years old or so. So it's from 2005 for a number of reasons. One is that Michaela recommended it to me, and she's worked with this video with a lot of different audiences and has spoken highly of it. Secondly, that although this was created 5 years ago, the sense of concerns about education are really at the forefront because of the financial concerns facing our university, facing all of UC, and facing the state of California. And a lot of us are in leadership positions where we have to make or go along with difficult decisions. And I think from the point of view of the Teaching Resources Center, I'm particularly interested in seeing how we can do right by our students and continue to prioritize student learning and the different methods that we can use to inspire students to learn in ways that are interactive and effective. And then thirdly, there's some really interesting interviews with teachers, and we get to see some video of people teaching who we don't know. And I think that's important for this particular context because we always meet in rooms like this one to be respectful, to offer ideas, to challenge those ideas, but rarely to criticize, especially our fellow teachers. But I think interestingly, what we can do is we can point out more bluntly than we would be able to otherwise problems that we see with the different approaches, because we know that no one's feelings will be hurt, depending on who sees this video. And furthermore, we can think about ways that we can distinguish our own teaching as well. That said, I think there's some excellent examples of good teaching as well in what we're going to see. However, those examples don't begin until about 30 minutes into the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start it up. I'm going to give you all just a little bit of context for the introduction, and then I'm going to fast forward to the good parts. And then we will see about half an hour's worth of people actually talking about teaching in the context that I've been speaking about. Then I'll stop the video and we can start our own discussion. For those of you who have come late, welcome. I've got some forms here that we've been asked to sign that give consent to, for us to be recorded. So I'll send those around and I'll leave these here. And then, finally, formally, I shall welcome you all to another meeting of the Faculty Mentoring Faculty Program. My name is Andy Jones, and I run this program for the Teaching Resources Center. I'm one of three, what do we call ourselves? Academic developers who are also here, and I want to introduce or reintroduce you all to them. Michaela Hunsinger is my colleague in the orange, and over here in kind of the chartreusey pink is it? Oh, how about that? There's a good trivia question. It's more of a magenta, yes. Is Leslie Madsen Brooks, and I'm grateful to have them both here, and also to have Winder McConnell, the director of the Teaching Resources Center, also from German and Russian. All right, and now I'm going to introduce this video. It's Declining by Degrees. I want to mention that this can be purchased on Amazon even more easily for those of you who are Netflix subscribers. This can, depending on what sort of relationship you have with Netflix, this can be downloaded and streamed at your leisure. And this is how I watched much of it last night. So if you have Netflix, you can get it very easily that way. Michaela?
Along those lines, since we have this copy in the Teaching Resources Center and it has the permission attached to it that it can be shown to large groups, I would say we could check it out if people if they want to use it in their departments.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be too that your taste will be whetted and you'll want to see the rest. But alas, it's a 2-hour video, and we're only going to spend as much time as we have. So you may want to see more. And now, yeah, if you could start it. And then we may want to dim the lights as well. There so that we have a chance to talk. I'm going to bring up the lights. He said, looking at a huge dashboard of about 100 switches. Could you help me turn the lights?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. And then I'm also going to transform myself. Do I just hold the button down? And now it's on. Transform myself into Phil Donahue. I think you can just leave it as it is. It's all good. Thank you so much for your help. For those of you who are just joining us on the videotape at home, we just saw about 35 minutes of Declining by Degrees, Higher Education at Risk, a PBS home video with a discussion of a focus on teaching, and we saw a variety of different teaching methods and approaches. I'm going to be passing around the microphone, but I'm curious to know, I have some topics that we can bring up, but I'm wondering what struck you, what thoughts you have, and especially what sort of candid comments you'd like to offer about some of the university teachers we saw. Who would like to start? Great, thanks.
Well, there were a lot of really good things in there, but the thing that stuck out for me the most was motivating the students is a big problem, or challenge, I should say, rather than problem. And I think a lot of us, as faculty, when we were going through college, we were self-motivated, and it was never an issue. And we start teaching, and at first, we don't even imagine that we have to motivate the students. And it only dawns on us after a while, oh, you know, it's not just about content, we have to motivate them. And I think like the political science professor clearly, I mean, she was interacting with her students, so I think she was trying in a way, but boy, it's just hard to motivate students sometimes. And I think she's maybe not approaching it from that perspective of, you know, the first thing I have to do is motivate them.
There seemed a kind of complacency with that lack of motivation in that particular segment, right? Like there was a lot of shoulder shrugging, you know, this is how students are, what can you do? Oh, well. And that made me kind of frustrated, you know. I was thinking to myself, I could help you.
Well, I mean, yeah. she made this comment that this is not kindergarten, and
right.
You know, and I think that's a fair comment, but that only takes you so far, and then you have to go beyond that. You have to get over that
right.
hump and go beyond.
And you brought it up at the start as a challenge, and I think it's a challenge that many of us are not familiar. Many of us have not been trained in how to motivate students, right? As usually researchers.
Oh, I should add, sorry to interrupt, but
please.
A year ago on one of my evaluations, a student wrote the comment, "Professor treats us like we're kindergartners." So, and she said this is not, so maybe this is, I don't know whether that sounds bad, but maybe in this context it's okay because I'm really reaching out and trying to motivate them. I don't know.
Yeah. In my first teaching experience here at UC Davis, I got to teach with Ellen Lang, who's an excellent lecturer in linguistics. And one of our responses was, you know, I often appreciate the the romper room approach of Ellen and Andy, and here's why. And so it's back to this idea of kindergarten. But we made a point of like having all these different segments and of like focusing on students and calling their names when we would refer to them. And this is kind of what happened evidently on Romper Room. It's just like a focus on how do we validate all the like 3-year-olds who are sitting on the carpet, right, in the different stations in Romper Room. And they saw a similar sort of approach there. Bob, did you have a hand up?
I was really struck by how many issues were really confused and kind of presented as the same issue.
Right.
But there's really a number of themes, and they're different. The most successful educational experience was clearly the very first one, where we had the one-on-one experiential knowledge.
Right.
And when you consider the title and the situation of the California budget and the cutbacks and everything, I think the real challenge is how can we continue to have an experiential mentorship going on at the undergraduate level. And quite frankly, we're fighting just to do it at the graduate level now because everything is cutting. So I think, for me, that's the real issue that I'd maybe like to talk about. But let me also comment on some of the other two strains or strands that I see here. One strand was the apathy, lack of preparation, lack of study skills that the students actually bring in. That was our drunk there was probably the best example. And it was very clear that he didn't have these skills developed even probably in his household. You know, he was depending on mom punishing him and watching him, and he was expecting this to happen in college.
Right.
So I'm not very interested in this person because the world will give him his knowledge and his school of hard knocks, and he'll learn something eventually. So I'm not too interested in that, and I think it's also a red herring, so. All right, the other issue is what is going on with the teachers. Are they not motivational enough? Are they not inspirational enough? Is it the tenure system that's doing this? I mean, there's a lot of little smoking guns behind innuendos that are going on here, and I think they're just lumping too many things together. All of us could always learn to be better teachers, especially by looking at other mentors, other teachers. Learning never ends, even for us. But whether that's the root of the ills of our system, which is an education system trying to educate the masses and a very large middle class, should we go back to the European system, which is basically flunk them all the first year and tough luck? And I mean, that I don't think is going to fly in the United States, but certainly is a way of raising expectations. I don't know, there's just a lot, there's too much here that's not analyzed carefully and thrown together as, oh, this is what's wrong.
Right.
And I was a little disturbed by that. So
okay. So it's a movie, someone said, and I think that's a good point. Yes, thank you. Krishnan?
No, it will be very brief. You don't want to come close to me.
Sure, I will.
So I don't want to give it to you. There is an expectation that everybody has to have a degree. Everybody does not need to have a degree. Why do you need a bachelor's degree if you are selling hamburgers at McDonald's? Oh, but there are people who do that, right? So why do you need, there are people with PhDs working at companies doing jobs that somebody with a bachelor's degree can easily do. I know several of them. And why do they need to have a PhD? We have an expectation that we need to produce lot of products. And we are in that culture. So talking about the European system, if you can, what they have is a technical path. They don't want everybody to go and get a PhD, but they send a lot of people for technical training. They are good electricians, good carpenters. They can make anything. Why you think Mercedes runs into 40 years of its lifetime and Ford doesn't? Okay, so people have skills. What we in US don't have is, we don't have a technical path. We think everybody should have this high diploma.
Interesting, good. Other comments? Winder?
Well, I think there's one thing that struck me about this that wasn't really emphasized, but it's a very poignant point, and I think it does affect probably, maybe 90% of the people that I know who are teaching, very likely perhaps the same figure throughout the United States. The reference that was made to, despite the fact that the students in the political science professor's class seem to be tired or not really too interested and so on, 66% or so of them received A's or B's. And it brings up that whole question of giving too much for too little, the grade inflation question. And I think of the colleague at, I think it's Yale, who decided to do the following. He did not want to punish the students and make it difficult for them in competition, let's say, for other graduate posts or graduate student positions. So he put down 2 grades, and the one was the grade that he was going to assign them that would go onto their transcript, and the grade beside that was the grade he would actually give if no such thing as grade inflation existed, or if they were in the classes that he had attended in the 1950s and 60s. And it was rather revealing. But there's an incredibly difficult, they talk about a pact here, for example, of you don't bother me, I don't bother you, and there's a type of peace. And I am sure on this campus there are individuals who have not succumbed to grade inflation and are very, very honest about it. And that the grades are correspondingly much lower than they would be somewhere else. But what is probably needed is some type of, shall we say, mass understanding, realization that we've all got to start taking another look at this. I'm as guilty as anyone when I look at it. And of course, sometimes I try to fob it off and, well, I'm teaching integrated studies class, and after all, these are the creme de la creme, and, well, they should be getting the grades that they're getting. But, and when one young fellow looked as though he might slip into the B- category, his mother was on the line to me, saying, well, this is terrible. He'll lose his scholarship. He won't be in that residence hall any longer, and so on. And I suppose the true answer should be, I'm very sorry, and I'll be happy to talk to him and what he could do to help pull it up, but I'm not changing any grade. How do we address that? Now, maybe others feel that we are being fair, but I have felt for some time now, even into the decades, we're giving actually too much for too little. We're being very generous.
Other comments, questions about that, or anything else? Okay, Leslie, then Frank, and then over here.
I think something that was overlooked in this video was students who work. A tremendous number of our students work, and in the next fall I'm moving to a different university, and the average age of undergraduates there is 26. Very working class. The students put themselves through college. And here it's clear, I mean, I saw Amherst on t-shirts when they were moving into the dorms. And, you know, they're at the University of Arizona, which is, you know, kind of known as a party school. They were at, I don't know much about Western Kentucky, but you know, when the students say they just hang out with their friends, they don't really do anything. I don't think that's the case with our students. I think many of our students are tired because they're working 20 or 30 hours a week, you know. I mean, yes, we do have a lot of students who are from, you know, wealthier East Bay families, but we also have an awful lot of students who are first-generation college students, and that wasn't addressed here. And that sets a whole nother sort of layer of challenges on teaching.
Yeah. Absolutely. One thing that we learned, I learned a lot of things about the students and the faculty in this video from having watched the whole thing that we won't get to discover. One thing that I learned, for instance, is that at Western Kentucky, they accept anywhere from 70 to 85% of the students who apply there. We also, I don't know if you remember at the very beginning, there was an African-American student who was moving in with her family. She is a student who comes home, does her schoolwork, goes to bed, and then wakes up at 10 p.m. to start her overnight shift in a factory that I think they were making car parts. And she was working with lasers. And so it was a sort of labor that depended upon the skills that she was learning in her classes, but which, so the documentary did try to touch upon those sort of students. Frank, did you remember what you wanted to say?
Also wanted to go along Leslie's line. One of two things. First, the observation about students. One of the biggest challenges I have in remaining the job I have, that I find myself extremely unfair, because I do have to grade what students deliver, but I do know, because I happen to know my students relatively well, that you have an extremely uneven distribution of assets. It is an enormous difference whether you're a student who drives his own or her own BMW and has a nice studio, rent and access to high-speed internet, and the other student who lives with her single mother and has to take care of the small kids and has to work on the side. And so what am I grading? What am I grading? Because none of the classes we teach are so difficult that people with some kind of effort cannot make it. In which way do you deal with that situation if you have this knowledge? So do you, by simply not looking at the conditions under which students do participate in this university, one can pretend to be just, but in fact one is in a way very severely continuing to be unjust and deal with, aside from sort of personal tragedies which happen very often. The second part is, which was mentioned, which I know only from my own career, is that teaching is really seen as a lower intellectual endeavor. I do think, at least with the people I have to deal with, my claim that teaching is an intellectual challenge is something which I'm looked at with unbelievable eyes. People don't believe me that I have to think very hard to do the teaching, whereas people, I have the feeling it is mostly seen as somebody who has the ability to juggle with one ball more than others because he has a better hand-eye coordination, so some fluke of some personal things. It leads to the fact that therefore it has been suggested to me many times that I should change my position as a professor and become a lecturer. That sort of deals exactly with that kind of understanding, which goes to show that, again, what I feel is something one doesn't talk about, which I call preemptive obedience. That many of those colleagues who are in that trap, in that catch-22 situations, in ways to deal sort of with the intellectual challenges of teaching or the intellectual challenges of falling within the roster of the way in which one is graded and the way one is dealt with in class. So I leave it there. There are some other things.
In this documentary, we also get to meet a professor of economics at Western Kentucky who is on the tenure track and talks about these concerns, where when he's challenged about some of his teaching methods, he reminds the interviewer that his university wants him to turn out a certain number of articles a year if he's going to make tenure, and that there is that kind of pressure. I mean, when you talk about some of the oversimplifications that Bob spoke of, when these conversations happen only with many students about, the viewer is almost expected to say, you know, how could you? How could you feel that way? Look at these students who need you. So anyway, do you want to say something about that, Bob, before I?
A quick footnote.
Yeah.
Don't forget the student who said that he was had a 2.89.
Right.
He was perfectly happy.
Yeah.
That is an issue that I think is definitely worth discussion, talking about.
Oh, thank you. After listening to the comments and reflecting on this, I've had the great fortune of being a teacher since I was 21 years old. So I've taught at elementary school, junior high, colleges, universities in the United States, in Europe, in the Middle East, in a lot of places. And I've been here since '88. if I were to look like in a straight line to what kind of students I had as freshmen in '88 and what I have now, I wouldn't be doing justice to any of them and to myself. I can't compare them. So I'll go with what that professor said. We could look at what the lack is of their preparation and dwell on it, or say, okay, this is what I have, what I'm going to do with it. And this is how I come to terms with concepts like grade inflation and is the grade the same as I would have done, have I lowered their standards or not, is that depending on the class that I have, and I have the luxury of small classes, and assuming that we're all honest about the amount of material that we have to cover and why, so what's the purpose of the interaction I'm having with my students? Sharing a common goal, we all agree. If that relationship occurs of mentorship, if I can help them somehow in their path to self-discovery, helping them get there, being sidetracked, getting back, then I think I did my job. And then I'm happy with it. So in the years so far, the frustrations I've had have been either with parents of students, depending on their age, and or with the administration. I don't have problems with the students, because when I do, we get together and we figure them out. So that to me is that peace of mind. The frustration goes away if you have a party over there that you can interact with. Right. And I always can interact with students. So that to me is what keeps me going as a teacher. And also the fact that, man, I always think people in the sciences seem to be able to get these advances in interaction with the students, the large classes. Mm-hmm. We, in the humanities, I mean myself, in the social sciences, we seem to catch up now. But man, I would like to take that class with the clickers right away. I'm thinking of a way to do the clickers with my class, but it's smaller. I can do something similar. Very interesting.
What you describe also speaks to what an approachable teacher you are, that your students feel comfortable with you and that there is that open communication. Yeah. And that's very important, and that's not a given. Not all faculty have that automatically with their students. So. Mm-hmm.
This follows exactly on what Antonella was saying. Actually, if you compare those two large classes, the one with the political science professor, the other one with the lecturer doing the galaxies and so on, the one thing that immediately I noted, certainly the political science teacher was not standing like Ben Stein, I'm here to talk to you today, and doing an hour's lecture like that, but did move among them. That's, I think, absolutely necessary. But a big difference seemed to me, and it may be doing her an injustice, it might actually have shown up later in some other segment, was the diversity of activities that the gentleman, the lecturer, Fleming, was using within his class. They were in constant, the students were in a way in constant movement, whether it was with a clicker, and then discuss now with yourselves, try to convince this person to come over to this side of things and so on, and then seeing the results up on the screen. And those dimensions really were not there with the other one. The approach, I think, was quite different and very successful, and for obvious reasons.
Yeah, one thing I've learned from Dick Walters is that when students get to engage in activities, their minds are also activated, and the work that they do with their faculty and with their peers becomes much more vital and foundational. Let's hear from Dick, and then we'll finish up.
I just want to tell one story about the Davis campus and let you think about that because it relates not only to the instructor and the students, but the instructor as a member of an academic department and how some of that is affecting what we are accomplishing and failing to accomplish. This gentleman was involved in teaching medical students in basic sciences, and he decided that he would change his class. There were 100 students, and instead of having 5 lectures a week for the period that he had to cover the material that he was presenting, he put all of his lecture material and reading on a CD, DVD, whatever it was, and he then changed the time spent with the students into 5 discussion groups of 20 students each instead of 100 students. And with him to carry on these discussions was a clinician. He was a basic scientist. And they discussed cases that were relevant to the problems that were coming up with respect to the biochemistry, et cetera, that they were supposed to be learning. He published a paper that said that comparing scores on the National Board Part 1, which is what the medical students have to take to demonstrate proficiency in these basic sciences, that students who had participated in the lecture group for several years prior to the few years that he taught this and the case-based medicine, if you will, that the students in the case-based medicine performed better in their understanding of the basic sciences that they were supposed to be learning. That's the nice part of the story. The unfortunate part of the story is that after having done this for about 4 years, his department forbade him to teach that class in that way. And they went back to a different, he changed departments. He went from biochemistry into internal medicine, and he left the campus eventually, not too long thereafter. I leave that for you to think about because Pogo once said, "We've met the enemy and they is us." This group is a group that can effect change if you really work at it. And I ask you to think about that in terms of working with your fellow colleagues, some of those who don't come to these sessions, but who might be gradually persuaded to take an interest in the students and what they are there to learn, rather than ourselves and what we are doing to get merit and promotion.
Well, thank you very much. On that note, I will invite all of you to consult with the TRC professional staff, especially in the spring, and thank all of you for coming to see us today for this week's edition of the Faculty Mentoring Faculty Program. A week from today, we'll have Jack Hicks from the English department talking about lessons we can learn from teaching in the humanities. And then a week after that, Drew Hoffman will be here about encouraging class discussions. Thank you very much.